Here's the journey we're about to take. We'll begin with a question that has puzzled many observers. How can Zambia be praised as one of Africa's fastest improving economies, while so many citizens say life has become more expensive? To answer that, we first have to go back to 2011, tracing the rise of former ruling party, the Patriotic Front, PF, the presidencies of Michael Sata and Edgar Lungu, the debt crisis and political shift that brought Hakainde Hichilema to power in his sixth attempt to the presidency. From there, we'll examine the 2026 election itself, who's running, what they stand for, and why each party believes it offers the best path forward. We'll compare the manifestos with the realities on the ground, explore the deeper structural issues that continue to shape Zambia's politics, and end with this question that matters most. Not who you should vote for, but what type of questions every Zambian should ask before making that decision. Before we dive into that, be sure to like this video, share, and hit that subscribe button.
That's right. To understand why voters look at today's economic promises with so much skepticism, we have to travel 15 years to 2011. At the time, Zambia was technically booming. The ruling party that came to power 20 years earlier, the MMD, Movement for Multi-Party Democracy, had opened up the economy by cutting red tape and encouraging private ownership, and also welcoming a massive flood of foreign investment. On paper, it worked like a charm, pushing Zambia's annual economic growth rate to around 6 to 7%. It meant copper prices were high, new buildings and businesses were shooting up, and the country's national bank account was looking incredibly thick. But there was a massive catch. And look at the data, it tells a really fascinating story. To be fair, during the peak MMD boom, the national poverty rate did actually drop from a staggering 68% in 2006 down to about 54.7% by 2010. But here's the catch, after 2010, inequality started to rise right back up from 52% to almost 56%. This created an opportunity for the most charismatic, sharp-tongued leaders in Zambia's history. His name was Michael Sata, affectionately known as King Cobra. He built the Patriotic Front, or PF, by targeting the exact people who felt left behind by the booming economy. He ran on a fiercely pro-poor populist platform with a campaign slogan that was a direct hit to the wallet: more money in your pocket.
In fact, this was part of Sata's 90-day campaign promise, centered on aggressively tackling corruption, putting more money in people's pockets, as you say, by lowering taxes and delivering a new people-driven constitution. He also pledged to reduce the size of government, create more jobs, and honor the Barotse Land Agreement, settling a long-running secessionist dispute in western Zambia.
And guess what? It worked. In the September 2011 general election, Sata pulled off a massive upset. He secured 42.8% of the vote, ousting the incumbent president Rupia Banda, who finished with 36.1%. It was a historic moment because an incumbent lost and power changed hands peacefully for the second time in Zambia's history, and Sata's PF became the largest party in parliament.
More money in your pocket. It's hard to argue with that as a voter, especially when the ground really felt so unequal. How did he actually deliver these promises?
Well, the heavyweights within the PF, like future Vice President Guy Scott, future ministers Bob Sichenga and Winter Kawimba, put together a massive plan where the government would step in directly to run the economy and spend big. Once they won, they aggressively expanded cash handouts for the poor, raised the minimum wage for workers, and poured billions into highly visible infrastructure projects that people could actually see, like rural universities and national roads.
I mean, even to this day, some people look back at the Sata era with a lot of joy. It felt like a government was finally working for ordinary people, but it doesn't take an economist to notice that doing all of that at once must have completely emptied Zambia's pockets. Where did the money actually come from? Imagine your salary stays exactly the same, but suddenly you build a new house, buy a car, and start handing out cash to your relatives. Your paycheck can't cover that. So what do? You go out and take a massive loan. You basically take the ultimate kaloba on a countrywide scale. And that's exactly what Zambia did. They went on a massive international borrowing spree.
That's exactly right. The tax money coming in wasn't anywhere enough to cover the bill. So the PF government turned to international lenders, basically big foreign institutions willing to give Zambia kaloba in US dollars. In the financial world, they call these Eurobonds. It's like taking out a massive loan from a wealthy lender overseas, but instead of owing kwacha, and this is very important, you owe millions in hard dollars that you have to pay back with heavy interest. In 2011, Zambia's total external debt was a highly manageable 2.1 billion, but then the government went on an absolute borrowing spree, issuing 3 massive Eurobonds in 2012, 2014, and 2015. In less than 5 years, those 3 Eurobonds alone added 3 billion in high-interest commercial debt. By the time the dust settled around 2015, the country's total external debt had more than doubled, setting off a ticking time bomb that Zambia would have to pay back in hard foreign currency.
Eurobond. What's a Eurobond?
That's a great question. So think of a bond like an official written promise to pay back a debt. It's basically a financial paper that governments or even big companies like ShopRite can sell to investors to raise quick cash for big projects like buying machinery or building roads. In exchange, they promise to pay that money back later with extra interest on top. Now, a Eurobond is just a fancy version of this where the government borrows specifically in US dollars. The name makes it super confusing, but it actually has nothing to do with Europe. It means that you're taking out kalowa from global investors in hard US dollars.
And Zambia took out 3 massive Eurobond loans.
Exactly. On paper, these global loans were supposed to refurbish heavy railways, roads, and other infrastructure. But in reality, most of it just went to sustain the daily budget and cover the heavily expanded public wage bill. Remember those cash handouts and big salary hikes we mentioned earlier? Yeah, that's exactly how we paid for them.
So they were borrowing money in US dollars just to pay for everyday things in kwacha. Anyone who has ever taken kalowa knows that it's a complete disaster waiting to happen. It's like living on a financial time bomb, and it was only a matter of time before it exploded in our faces.
Completely.
And then in 2014, the trajectory shifted completely. Michael Sata tragically fell ill and passed away while in office 1 week after Zambia's 50th independence celebrations in October.
That's right. I remember Sata's sudden death triggered a brutal internal power struggle within the ruling PF. By the time the dust settled and Edgar Lungu rose to the party presidency while Guy Scott stayed on as interim president, the original heavyweights who had written the party's foundational manifesto were aggressively pushed out.
And when Edgar Lungu took over the presidency, he inherited an economy that was already starting to crack, along with a massive mountain of debt. But instead of slowing down and saving money, his government actually doubled down. To keep voters loyal, they started handing out cash and business equipment through youth empowerment funds and poured money into FISP or FISP, the Farmers Input Support Program, which is Zambia's main agricultural program that heavily discounts farming inputs like fertilizer. More on how that messy system works in a bit, but basically they were buying seeds and fertilizer for farmers at dirt cheap prices to keep them happy.
That's right. But the game had completely changed. Global copper prices, which is how Zambia makes most of its money, suddenly crashed. At the same time, massive corruption scandals started leaking out. I mean, look at the famous 42 for 42 scandal. The government spent $42 million on 42 fire trucks, literally $1 million per truck, for vehicles that people on the ground said looked secondhand. When you have stories like that coming out, traditional international donors, the foreign entities or countries and organizations that usually give Zambia free grant money, not kalowa, free grant money, completely locked their wallets. They looked at it like, why should we give you millions to build hospitals when a politician is just going to blow it on an overpriced project? So the free money dried up. But instead of stopping the spending, the government just switched lenders. They pivoted hard towards China, taking out billions in massive commercial loans from Chinese banks to build mega airports and massive highways. In fact, between 2015 and 2020, Zambia signed over $6 billion in new Chinese loan commitments. The country was essentially stacking debt on top of debt. And because of all this, cash was still flowing straight into these massive, top-heavy projects. Everyday poverty levels in villages actually started creeping right back up. These shiny mega projects were all part of Lungu's political campaign strategy that formed a key campaign slogan in the 2016 elections. Sonta Ipo wa Bomba, Bemba for show us where you have worked. Basically showing off to opponents that the fact that under Lungu, Zambia was a construction site. Tangible development you can touch and see what was happening. Bigger roads, new power plants.
By 2020, Zambia hit a financial brick wall that was impossible to avoid. The country's debt to GDP ratio rocketed past 100%. To put that in plain terms, Zambia's debt to GDP ratio, which is just comparing how much the whole country owes versus how much the entire economy actually makes in a year. Imagine you make 50,000 Zambian kwacha a year, but you owe over 60,000 kwacha in loans. You are basically drowning. Because of that, Zambia, during the pandemic, made history by becoming the very first African nation to default on its Eurobond payments. Default is just a fancy corporate word for failing to pay your bills. Zambia literally had to tell its international lenders, we don't have the money and we cannot pay you back.
The whole dream that started in 2011 with the catchy slogan, more money in your pockets, had officially run completely out of cash. The pockets were empty, pun intended, and it was in this exact moment, with the country basically bankrupt, prices going through the roof and public anger boiling over, that Hichilema and the UPND saw their opening.
Let's look at how they stepped into the vacuum.
So, with the country effectively bankrupt in 2021, Hakainde Hichilema and the UPND swept into power in a massive landslide. Simply known as HH, he was not a new face on the political scene. HH won on his 6th election attempt and had been leading a party that spent 23 years in opposition. HH positioned himself as the ultimate business savior, a self-made millionaire who could fix the broken math, clean up the corruption, and negotiate with the IMF. Hence the campaign slogan, HH will fix it. By the way, IMF, or International Monetary Fund, is basically the global lender of last resort. When a country's economy completely breaks down, they're the ones you go to for a massive financial rescue package.
And this wasn't just about changing the faces in State House. Under the hood, this was a massive shift in how the government actually thinks about money. To understand why the UPND's policies look so completely different from the PF, you have to look at the simple political reality in Zambia, where these two parties actually get their votes.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Think about it like this. A political party is always going to make rules and spend money in a way that keeps the main supporters happy. In Zambia, we don't have Democrats and Republicans like in the US, or Labour and the Conservatives like the United Kingdom. Instead, our politics historically split along regional and economic lines.
Okay. So the old PF base was heavily rooted in the urban areas like Lusaka and Copper Belt mining towns, along with people relying on city jobs and government workers.
Exactly, and because their voters lived in big, busy cities, the PF loved massive government spending. They focused on things that city voters notice immediately: big infrastructure projects, direct cash handouts, and wage hikes, expanding government jobs, and heavily discounting everyday costs to keep city life affordable.
Now, compare that to the UPND. Historically, their support base grew out of the rural farming regions and business community in places like southern, western, and northwestern provinces. Because of that, their whole mindset is built around business, farming, and self-reliance. The idea that the government should help you to do business, not just hand you a fish. Political scholars actually call this a rural liberalist party. And in fact, before they even took office, some UPND leaders openly argued that just handing out free cash to people all the time would backfire by making people dependent on the government instead of building their own financial independence.
So once they took power, how did they actually handle this absolute economic mess?
That's a great question. So they pulled out the classic pro-business playbook. Instead of quick fixes, they focused on sorting out the big foundation on the economy. First, they completely cut government fuel subsidies, meaning they stopped using national cash to artificially lower pump prices, which freed up a massive amount of money. Then they successfully renegotiated and reorganized the country's broken debt and worked overtime to repair damaged economic relationships with global superpowers like the US, UK, and China.
But they didn't completely abandon social programs, right? They did use some of those saved subsidy funds to roll out free education, and they executed that massive hiring wave of 30,000 teachers and 11,000 healthcare workers.
They did. And they made a massive push towards decentralization by expanding the Constituency Development Fund, or CDF, giving local communities the actual power to decide how to spend cash on local projects.
But this is exactly where the textbook business theory slammed hard into real-world politics. The IMF, remember the global lenders holding the rescue cash, wanted the new government to restructure the FISIP program, that massive farming program we mentioned earlier. The IMF saw it as a giant, expensive drain on the budget, but the government fiercely fought back against changing it.
Oh, completely. The prominent agricultural economist Anthony Chopoto wrote a brilliant breakdown on exactly why messing with agricultural policy in Zambia is so dangerous for any politician. You see, FISIP isn't just a farming plan. It's a massive political network. It serves a giant web of powerful politicians, big fertilizer suppliers, and local middlemen who are happy perfectly with the way things are. The current system basically gives them a direct pipeline to government money and political influence, so they will fight tooth and nail to protect it.
At the end of the day, even a pro-business government has to feed the political machine if they want to survive. And speaking of survival, notice how the UPND's tune is subtly changing as we approach the August 2026 elections.
Yeah, big time. In the latest 2026 national budget, they absolutely pumped up the CDF. For anyone tracking this in Zambia, think of CDF as decentralized cash. Instead of politicians in Lusaka deciding how to spend every single ngwe, the government sends money directly into those 156 local communities across Zambia so that people on the ground can decide if they need a clinic, a new school block, or water boreholes. And the scale of this funding shift under the new Dawn administration is just mind-blowing. Back in 2021, each constituency got a tiny 1.6 million kwacha. But in 2022, the government jacked that up to 25.7 million kwacha. That's a massive single-year spike of over 1,500. They didn't stop there either. They kept increasing it year on year by about 10% in 2020, another 8% in 2024, and 18% in 2025. Now for the 2026 budget, it has officially hit an all-time high of 40 million kwacha per constituency. When you look at the big picture, it's a total reimagining of how development money moves through the country.
Yeah, wow, that's a massive cash injection straight to the grassroots.
It's much more power to the people style of spending compared to the strict austerity they preached when they took over. And honestly, they're feeling the heat. The latest Afrobarometer data, which is a big respected continental survey that tracks public opinion, showed a staggering 73% negative economic sentiment on the street, and in 2024, 74% said they have no regular power. People are frustrated with the high cost of living, so the government is scrambling to put money directly into local communities to show how they're delivering.
Which brings us right to the starting line of this 2026 election on August the 13th. If the voters are deeply frustrated and the ruling party is pivoting to grassroots spending to protect its seat, who exactly is stepping up to challenge them?
Well, to understand the chaotic lineup of parties on the ballot today, you have to understand the weirdest, most frustrating rule of Zambian political life.
What's that?
Political ideology is a luxury, but party loyalty, that's just a suggestion. In Zambia's political elite, switching parties isn't rare. It's basically the default career path. Politicians swap party colors faster than football players change jerseys at the end of a match.
Yeah, so then let's break down the musical chairs of the 2026 candidates.
I am an African.